This is the second year that we've done this. This is our first external person from outside of the school speaking, so I'm actually going to let Dr. Palakurthi do a more thorough introduction. But welcome back.
Thank you, Cody. Welcome, everyone. This is a special research forum that we've arranged. We're privileged to have Dr. Fred DeMicco from University of Delaware. He is my mentor. I was his student at Penn State. You probably heard this story before. Many of you have already met him. You've had classes with him, heard him speak, had lunch, but there are some that are new. Brennan, you probably didn't meet. Brennan, I would love to introduce. Brennan is our sport faculty member.
We've had some email correspondence.
Right. Oh yeah, right. And
Still gonna get him to go to Tuscany.
yes.
Sure. Add to those summer travel.
Yeah. He's not the only one, by the way. So Raymo Fuller, he is also a faculty member. And did you meet him yet? No. Okay, so Michael Hutchison, he's also a sport faculty member. And Cody, you just met. And I think you met Skylar, have you met him? Skylar is in, well, she's not even in any of our programs, but we love the fact that she's here. Okay, because she works really hard and
Convert, don't worry.
yeah, we're working on her. We're working on her. And then of course you had the rest of the students, and that's our undergraduate student. Introduce yourself. Come on, tell them.
I mean, I'm president of the RSO here at the university, and actually I didn't know this would be a meeting here, so I thought we were all downstairs. Our class, it is.
But I tell you what, you will learn a lot, and so there's a value-added proposition for you for being here.
You're free for the next 8 hours, aren't you?
Right. And you know, Chris, I'm trying to see who else is new. Nobody. Okay, good. So, what else can I say? He's the Aramart chair.
I can take over. You've said enough.
Thanks a lot. Sounds like I'm back in class.
Thank you for the introduction and the invitation. This is my second time here. And the first time here, I did the external report, the evaluation for the program. That was a few years ago. So I came back this week, and I've been teaching Tim's strategy class. In fact, we have class tonight, 5:30. So that's a big thing. Also promoting our Tuscany campus. So I had a chance to meet with 3 or 4 deans. We do have a new campus. I'm the president of the campus in Tuscany. So we're trying to get more universities involved. The University of Memphis is a strong partner. We actually have an agreement already signed to go over the Tuscany. So the MOU is done, and we're excited. And hopefully some of the faculty will want to put together a program and take students over for a semester, a short-term program, even a week. So it's a great campus. We have plenty of space. We utilize it a lot. And we also have funding for faculty, fellowships, which is very unique through our foundation. So if you're interested in any of that, Radish has all the details. Certainly could reach out to me. My email, I forgot to put it up there, but fdemicco@udel.edu. In fact, it's up at the top from my class Wednesday night. So if you have anything you want to check or contact me, it's right up there. Don't hesitate. So I was at, I did my work at Virginia Tech, my doctoral work. Came to Penn State, and that's where I met Radish. He was my graduate assistant, research assistant. And for about 3 years, I was on his committee. I wasn't his chair, but I was on his committee for his dissertation and at Penn State. And then I left there after 15 years, went to the University of Delaware, which I've been there for 16 and a half years. I actually retired from Delaware officially 2 weeks ago, which is, right. So they made me, they haven't officially made me professor emeritus, but the faculty have to vote on it, and my chair called me, said it was unanimous, so that's great. So I get to keep an office there. I may not go back. The big thing is keep my laptop, so because all my material's on there. But anyway, so I am working with the University of Memphis. I hope to continue with that, the Tuscany campus. I'm a visiting professor at the University of Central Florida, the Rosen College, and I'm going this spring semester to the University of South Florida, where I'll be a visiting professor. So I'm definitely keeping busy, and I like it. I really like it. I enjoy hospitality and tourism and every aspect of that. And I also love the international dimension. I teach the cruise ship management course. I've been doing that for about 25 years. We actually take students on cruises, South America, Australia, New Zealand, Europe. So I really like getting out with the students, graduate and undergraduates, and doing something globally with them, seeing the world through their eyes. It's very inspiring. I like the planning of the trips. And you know, to be honest, sometimes when the trip comes, I'll say to a faculty, why don't you go? I mean, I am happy to have you go. I don't need to travel again, but I always end up going, and I enjoy being with the students. So today, I'm gonna talk about some trends. This is a new book I'm working on. It's actually the 3rd edition. We did Hospitality and Travel 2010, 2015, and the next one should be out in the spring, 2020. It's really further than that we try to look at some trends that are coming down the pipe. How are you, Dan? Thanks for coming. Good. Thank you. So we'll get started. You have a, let's see. Is this working? Is it this one? No. Yeah. Maybe you need a battery. Okay. I'll have to work from here then,
Okay.
Doctor.
Unless you want me to move.
No, I'll
forward.
do it. It's just, okay. So here we go. So this was the last book we did, The Future of Hospitality and Travel. I do have co-authors. And then the newest book is gonna be, and I apologize, I think maybe the next one might be back, yeah. So this is the 2020. I'm actually gonna be the first author with this new book. And this is the book that Tim's using. I was able to give him like the manuscript so I can get feedback, and but the hardcover will be out. And there's a tablet edition too. I'm working with Kendall Hunt, and they do a nice job with the edition with the tablet. A little cheaper for the students by $20. So it's symbolic, I know, for the strategy class. How many have heard of the red ocean strategy, blue ocean strategy? Yeah, so we've talked about it at night in this class. So it's very competitive out there. So you want to go from a red ocean, kind of symbolically would be your sharks fighting, blood in the water, to a blue ocean. So we talk a lot about that, and how do you become a blue ocean? So you look at the trends, and you try to find a niche that nobody else has found and exploit it. So that's the whole focus of understanding the environment around you and trying to determine where you need to go as a company. Because in the red ocean, everybody's pretty much doing the same thing. You know, they're commoditized. So we're looking for unique products. So the strategy class, we spent a lot of time on that. But that's where I've been focusing with the class. Some of the trends I'm going to talk about a little later, some of the top tech trends in the new book coming out, we talk about virtual reality, augmented reality, bullet trains, and space tourism, and artificial intelligence. So I'll get to that. We also, you have a handout, and this is actually a draft of the chapter, be the last chapter in the book, called The Past is Prologue. So I'll get to that. But before that, I want to look at some other things that are of interest. So I like this slide, and you've probably seen this. But basically, you're looking to the future. You have to look ahead, far ahead. Try to determine what the trends are going to be. And if you don't, the outcome is going to be very, very obvious, because the future isn't what it used to be. And you all know that, how things are just changing at the speed of light, and you really have to keep on top of things. So a lot of my students are interested in event management. So we take a perspective in the book. We have a whole chapter on the MICE market and the events. But one of the big challenges for conferences and people traveling is this terrorism and the threat of terrorism. So, but as you've probably seen some of these slides, but we've updated them. So in our industry, hospitality, tourism, we're very welcoming of guests. But people could come right into a hotel lobby, and that's the nature of our business, but it presents some challenges in terms of security. So this was the Radisson bomber. This was in Jakarta, Indonesia. There's the hotel. It's a Marriott hotel. And look at that hotel, look at all the cars and people around it, look how much glass. So a car pulled up, this is the recreation, a van with explosives, and just took that front of the building right out. And this was people having breakfast, so many people lost their lives. So we started working in Delaware with DuPont, looking at some of the products that they made and how we could introduce them into the hotel industry, and how you saw all that glass, how we might be able to use, I'm going to show the glass again, how can we use that product, Kevlar, which you've all probably heard of, that is the basis for the bulletproof vest. So I worked with DuPont and we started strategizing and thinking about how we might be able to use that to add a layer of protection in buildings like the Marriott we just saw. So there's some things in the works that we're looking at, but again, in our industry, you have to get beyond hospitality and start working with other engineers and companies like DuPont. Before DuPont, I worked with Gore-Tex, because they're headquartered in Delaware. They're actually an old DuPont spin-off, if you will. They invented the Gore-Tex fabric, which you have probably, and we actually started making bed covers with that material, the Gore-Tex, because mattresses are expensive. So we came up with a pad that breathed and didn't make a lot of noise, but protected the mattress. That was the whole goal. So those were available commercially. But those are just some ideas of some of the innovations that we've had based on some of the things happening. Other things we've done, there's a company, another Delaware company. Delaware is a very small state, but a very innovative state. I think because of DuPont, a global giant, because they're a shell really of themselves of what they used to be. But they're very focused, they're still very strong. But Dow Chemical came in and took them over. But there is a company called Safe Place. Has anybody heard of Safe Place? But what they do is they crash test buildings. They crash test buildings. So the founder, his name is John Fannin, and I know him very well. He's taught my classes and he's a good friend. He likes food, so he started the Chef de Rôtisseurs in Delaware. And I was one of the founders. I think he needed 15 people as a founder, and I helped him. But he invented this company that would go into hotels and test everything for safety. Fire, locks, anything related to security. And of course, with terrorism being such a big thing, that was a big part of it as well. And then he would certify, and you'd be able to put the seal of approval, of certification, on your building and on your website. And a lot of the meeting planners really found this as a competitive advantage. And remember earlier I said that we're so commoditized. Everybody's doing pretty much the same thing. How do you differentiate your product and service? So this is just one way, because of all the safety issues in our industry, whether it be big sporting events. So his company in Wilmington also does hospitals, universities, stadiums. So they do other facilities that you see up on this next slide. So these are some of the, we crash test building. I kind of like that. Just check it out. So for meeting and event planners, it's something they're starting to look for, particularly corporations where executives might be attending, key managers. If anything ever happened to the key leadership in a company, as you know, the stock price, the confidence in the company can start to go down. So the meeting and event planners, the corporate planners, starting to look for hotels and facilities that have this certification. These are just some of the things that they look for. So that's Safe Place.
Doctor, is it one level of certification, like pass-fail?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's one. I mean, either you get it, but if you don't get it, they'll work with you to achieve it, which is the way I think it should be. Either you're safe or you're not. Mm-hmm. There's no gray zone, right? So that's the way he operates. He's an engineer and a heck of a guy. As you said, you would love to meet him. He loves good food. But But he appreciates, he really appreciates. He's not, has no culinary background, but he just, and he's a thin guy too. I mean, if you saw him, you'd say you like food, but he does. Another thing I came up with, I don't know if you were involved with this, Radish, but it's called the Temp Matrix. We started thinking about cities and hotels, stadiums, where you can look to see if it's safe and secure. So it's something that's been published, and we did it right after the earthquake and tsunami that hit Japan. So I think that's the name of the paper too, you can find it. It's been out a few years, but basically we looked at man-made disasters and natural disasters. So we looked at man-made would be like high crime, natural would be earthquakes or regions where there's a lot of chemicals that could be exploited. And so I think Memphis was on here. It was right in the top, probably a place you don't want to be, which is a high man-made disasters and the potential for natural disasters. And I think we were talking about the fault line for earthquake. And that was, if you read the paper, that's what it was. So why have this? It's a way to teach your students and teach your employees, because people might call and say, well, you know, I'm really worried about this. I'm really worried about that. So you have to be prepared to give statistics. So that's really why we did it. We did it for meeting planners, event planners, and you could see the cities that New York City's even on there, and so on and so forth. If you're interested in the paper, I think it's available free if you just Google that. I call it the Temp Matrix. Tourism, Environmental, Man-Made Problem Matrix. Temp. And that was something that we came up with. The other thing, we talk about weapons of mass disruption, not mass destruction, which would have been the previous slide, but mass disruption. And that's the whole cyber attacks, and that's become very, as you know, in hotels, there was a graduate, in fact, this was Katerina, who was my former student at the University of Delaware. We did this study and actually looked at attitudes of guests after a breach of a hotel. So we looked at several hotels, and she found that if there was a data breach, consumers that would choose hotels had less confidence in staying at that hotel. So it was a theoretical study and a good study. But we call it weapons of mass disruption, because it'd be very disruptive to your property. And these are all things we teach our students. Again, looking at some trends for meetings and expositions. You have a lot of events here. You have one of the largest meeting spaces in the city. So a lot of the areas are getting very crowded and getting clogged. So there are competitors out there. One of the big things is the option to take a cruise. So when I go on a ship, this is one of the ships that we went on. I do a student cruise study at sea every year, sometimes twice a year. And this was one of the ships, I think that was the Auckland, New Zealand trip, the Sapphire Princess. But every time we go on as a group of students, 25 to 30 students, we always get an event manager for our group, which is great. So you get this person, they stay with you, they take care of you. I say to my students, there are jobs for this, but the cruise industry is really booming. It's one of the fastest growing industries for travel and tourism and hospitality. So I'm gonna give you some facts about that might be of interest to you. So I like to think that, I came up with this saying, if we teach students on a ship, classes on a ship for students, they always want to sit in the front row. So you guys are in the back row. Dan's in the front. He's a very studious type, but it's true. So we've been doing a lot of the study at Seas. It's a great environment, and for groups too. So when I go on, there's usually medical groups, legal groups, all doing all their meetings at sea. One of the regions that I'm particularly interested in is Asia, particularly China. And certainly one of the fastest growing. A lot of the ships that you know, the Royal Caribbeans and Norwegian, they're all repositioning their ships to Asia. So it's really exciting what's happened. And I like that figure down below with the plus sign. If just 1% of the Chinese take a cruise each year, they will more than double the size of the world cruise market. Because right now, Chinese is less than 0.05%. People have cruise. America, what percentage do you think in America people have cruise? What do you think?
40%?
2%.
Well, you guys are kind of right in the middle, or it's actually about 20 to 25%. So that means 75% or so have never cruised. It's very significant. Just think of the opportunity to penetrate the market and get people on. So even in America, and most people live along the coast where the ships are, right? But only about 25% it's going have ever cruised. 75% have not. That's exciting. That's an opportunity for our industry. It's an opportunity for students. Well, when I was at the University of Central Florida last spring semester, I taught 2 sections of the cruise class. We actually do a cruise on the Oasis of the Sea. That's a Royal Caribbean. It's over 6,000 passengers. Has anybody been on that ship? You've probably seen pictures of 6,000, and they have 2 other ships the same size. So we were on the original, the Oasis of the Sea, and it's just like a floating, it is a floating city, even if it's a 3,000 passenger. So for careers, there's great opportunities. In fact, in my class, University of Central Florida, and coming from Delaware, which we don't have a cruise port, but we're on the ocean, it was amazing how many cruise companies, executives would come and guest speak. They all wanted to. It was just fitting them into your class. That was my biggest challenge. But they would come because that's the place to be if you want to do cruising. So a lot of the students got great jobs when they graduated, working at the luxury cruise like Seabourn. I have 4 go to Europe. It starts in June. And they all started in food and beverage. But there's spas, recreation, rock walls, technology, accounting, finance, every functional area you will find on a cruise ship that you would find in a hotel. In fact, you'd find more because on the ship they have a person or 2 that are in charge of the environment. So in a hotel, you may not have a person dedicated to that, but on the ship they have to. So there's lots of, the reason I'm telling, I just think there's a lot of career opportunities for our graduates, whether it be sport and recreation or hospitality, and it's growing. It's really growing, and I think China is really just a phenomenal growth. In fact, we're looking to do a cruise in 2019 with the Asian Studies minor on campus and leave Shanghai. And speaking of Shanghai, so here's Shanghai. Some of you have probably been there. So I took this photo with my students. It was an MBA group. We took spring break. And we started in Taiwan, we went to Hong Kong, we ended up in Beijing, ended up in Shanghai. And so we were on the 82nd floor of the Hyatt Hotel. In fact, it was, the lobby was the 82nd floor, as I remember. Below it was mixed use businesses, so you take the elevator, fast elevator up 82nd, and I took the picture. And why I took this picture, a couple of reasons. This is kind of the iconic telecommunications tower you've seen. But here, can you see this? It's like a blue bubble. Everybody kind of, spaceship? That's the new cruise terminal, which wasn't open. They were constructing it while I was there. But now it's open, and it's the largest cruise terminal in the world. And a lot of the Chinese and Americans that come will go out of there. So the cruise I'd like to do, and I have not done one of Asia, but I'd like to do one, been to Asia, is to leave Shanghai right here and go to South Korea and then over around Japan. So that's what we're looking at, and maybe some of you and some of your students will want to go. I think that would be a really good way to learn the culture. And the cruise ships are a really good way because you can see a lot while you get off the ship, but while you're sleeping, the ship is moving. So you wake up, we're in a new port, and for a student, a new opportunity to learn. So that's kind of the model I like to use, to study at sea. It's hard to get students to intern there, but it's starting to pick up. I have made some progress on getting students to live on the ship. Skip that. Okay, this This is something called air cruise. Anybody ever hear of it? Something you're working on. It's a cruise ship, but you do it through the air. And if you don't like the water, you can take an air cruise. You can find the YouTube video of this if you wanted to see it. But kind of fascinating. So basically this is what it looks like, the rendering. So you can move around when you're on the airship, but it cruises to destinations all over the world. That's the inside. And then when it arrives, it docks. People come down and they're in the city at their destination, and that's their hotel. So think about that. You arrive, you dock at your hotel, you go out and do your tours, come back, and that's where you sleep. So I think I'll talk more about that in a little while. Air cruise clipper in the cloud. So you can watch that. Let's see. So I want to talk a little bit about what you have in the handout. Before though, self-driving. So this is a picture from, I don't know when, the 50s, I think. People were starting to think about these self-driving cars back then. Of course, now today, you hear Amazon, Google, Apple, they're all working on these self-driving cars. So I'm thinking, I showed it to my students in the strategy class. I said, is this good for the hospitality industry, or will it have a negative impact? And when I asked that question, it was really interesting to see the different answers that. So one student said it's a real positive. I said, well, why? She said, well, my grandmother lives upstate New York, and she always loved to go to Miami, and she used to drive, take her time. But now she can't go because she doesn't see very well, so she stopped going. She said if this was available, she'd get in that car and sleep in the car. She'd wake up, she'd be in Miami Beach. So that was kind of, for tourism, that was good. And then another student was, well, I could see that as a negative. I said, how so? Well, maybe your grandmother from upstate New York would have stopped a couple, 3 nights and stayed in a hotel along the way. Now she doesn't have to because the car is just going to keep going. She could be in the back doing reading, sleeping, whatever. So I said, okay, that's good perspective. So just wondering how it's going to impact us. Time will tell. I think it's pretty exciting though. And that's positive or negative. How many have heard of the Hyperloop? Yeah, that's pretty exciting, isn't it? What's going on, how that's going to change travel and tourism. So Elon Musk, he wants to do this, and I know even where I live in Colorado, I live in a town called Steamboat Springs. It's about 3.5 hours northwest of Denver. And I know Denver is starting to study this Hyperloop because you can go from Denver Airport. Many of you have probably flown. It's a great airport, but it's pretty far out from the city. Maybe, depending on the traffic, could take a half hour or even more, but 20 minutes I give myself. But they're saying this Hyperloop in less than 10 minutes will go from the Denver airport all the way to Vail. So skiers can come into the airport and they're there. So the towns are starting, even in when I was in Orlando, they were talking about not the Hyperloop per se, but a high-speed rail going from Miami to Orlando. So it would go from Miami, people would get on, stop in Orlando near Disney, let you off, and then continue on to the Orlando airport. At least that's the track that they're building for now. Takes like a half hour. Very, very quick. So they're starting to think about that in Florida. But this Hyperloop is quite unique. And here's kind of a rendering of what it might look like. So you get in the car and it's in a vacuum tube. So there's no friction, no resistance. It's propelled along. Here's, I think that's Jefferson Memorial in DC. So the tube, yeah, visually, certainly, you question aesthetically what's going to happen, but here's another version of it. Okay. All right. So let's shift gears. Another area that I think is growing, particularly in the MICE market. In fact, we were talking about this at lunch yesterday at the hotel meeting, where you have these world-class hospitals in Memphis, like St. Jude's and some of the others, and having people, how they're expanding. People come from all over the world. They need a place to stay. So this whole area of what we call medical tourism is really got a lot of way to grow. And our students will have opportunities in terms of careers as well. So I want to talk a little bit about that as a big career. In fact, for conferences, I think it's another area too that has a lot of potential. So I always tell our students that hospitality bridging healthcare, H to H, that's what I've termed it, hospitality bridging healthcare. And the reason is, when you go to the hospital, most of the services after your procedure are hospitality related. So think about that. I like to say about 70% or so hospitality related. So you have an operation, you have a procedure in a hospital, then everything else for the most part is hospitality. Feeding you, cleaning your room, transporting, it's like a hotel. So this is an area that's just gonna grow. In fact, during the last big recession, this was the area that kept growing, healthcare. Hospitality went down in terms of jobs, but healthcare continued to grow. So I tell our students, why not be a general manager of a healthcare campus and don't only look at hotels. Now they look at me and say, I don't want to work in a hospital, I want to work in a hotel. I totally get it, I totally get it. But then my graduates come back 15 years later and they says, I have children, I want some time, I don't want to be working till midnight, I don't want to be working every weekend. They go into healthcare. And that's like the best choice they can make. So as an educator, as you know, we can just plant the seed and let them know. But I think the jobs are gonna be so good in careers because the medical communities are starting to realize that hospitality has a lot of expertise they can bring into our facilities and really up the game and make it more competitive. Because hospitals compete too. In fact, with the Affordable Care Act, all hospitals are evaluated by the patients. And if you get a bad score, you won't get as much of a reimbursement. So they've been hiring, we do a master's degree now at the University of Delaware on the patient experience, called the Patient Experience Academy. And basically saying that we do it with Marriott and Ritz-Carlton. They help us teach the courses. So it's really important to have a high level of service in the healthcare. So that's one of the things. In fact, I wrote a book, came out about 3 or 4 months ago with Apple Academic Press. It's called Medical Tourism and Wellness, Hospitality Bridging Healthcare. And I wrote several of the chapters, maybe half of the chapters, but I had experts also writing. I had a foreword by the Chief Operating Officer of the Mayo Clinic. I've done some work with her. I'll talk about that in a bit. But she was the first female to have that Chief Operating Officer at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. So she's a friend, good friend, and we did some work together. I'll just send it around if anybody wants to see it. So that's the book specific to medical tourism. Don't mind if I take my coat off. Okay, now that I'm warmed up, we can. Okay, so why do people travel for medical? Because it's a lower cost, about 1/10 of the cost actually. Quality of care is very good. Usually the international hospitals are accredited by the Joint Commission on Accreditation in Illinois, and shorter waiting times. You hear stories about people have to wait 6 months to a year to have an operation, maybe a heart operation or something for cancer, so they can travel, and it's about 1/10 of the cost. Now what's interesting is the insurance companies actually starting to pay for the patients to go overseas. They save a bundle of money. They'll pay for the airfare, the hotel, and a lot of people are staying in nice places. So at Orlando, at UCF, they've built this medical city called Lake Nona. Has anybody heard of it? It's near the airport, and maybe 20 minutes from where I work at the Rosen College of Hospitality Management in Orlando. But they're excited about this medical city, like the Silicon Valley, although they haven't used that term, but they really want to be known for destination and investing a lot of money. Hotels, people come in, stay in the hotels, have the treatment, etc. And I'll talk more about some unique designs in just a bit. I throw this picture up there. I ask everybody, where in the world is this? Anybody know? No? It's actually Tel Aviv, Israel. They're known as a medical mecca. It's a very big destination for medical tourism. So you have to think about people leaving the US and other countries to go to another country, but also people leave other countries and come to the US. People that come to the US from outside tend to have more money, whereas Americans that go tend to have no insurance, and that correlates with probably lower income. So they'll travel all around the world, and there's every country, China, India, they all have specialties. Thailand, South America, South Africa, and I'll show you some of these sites. But this is Tel Aviv, so you can see the Mediterranean up here. And they've really, I have a friend who goes here from Philadelphia, Jefferson Hospital, and they bring a team over every year. And they meet patients. And when you check into like the Hilton, you get a medical concierge. I'm starting to see this more in the United States too. So hotels that are near medical centers actually have these concierges that help the patient navigate, make all the arrangements. So that's another opportunity, I think, for our graduates. And I see this increasing. That is a trend that's going to continue, the whole medical tourism area. So for students, it's good to know. So Mayo Clinic, that's one of their hospitals. They actually have 4 hospitals, but here's where they're going to. I put this up in Orlando at UCF, and they said, wow, it looks like Disney. That's actually Rochester, Minnesota. So they have billions of dollars of investments, and they do want to be known as the Silicon Valley of medicine. So you have a lot of companies coming from outside the US, setting up medical facilities, research labs, and they're all teaming with the Mayo Clinic to be a really great destination. So I work with them, and one of the challenges, Mayo is known for their medicine, very strong, high quality. People, the very high ratings. In fact, it was ranked one of the top hotels in America. And the person in charge there said to me, we're great on our medicine, but our customers don't like the hotels, they don't like the dining, the entertainment options, the transportation. So that's what we're working on now. We're trying to move up on the curve, so to speak, the quality curve for those other amenities, which are the hospitality services. So they're getting about $4 billion, and it's government money, it's private support, it's investments, and they're also, I've been talking to the university there, they've called me, they're looking to start a degree in this whole hospitality and healthcare arena, which I think is perfect for a place like Rochester or any city. And I think Memphis has, as I see Memphis, and I don't know Memphis very well, because this is only my second time, but I really think sometimes it's good to have fresh eyes. I think Memphis has a great opportunity to be known as a medical hub, a medical mecca, so to speak, and to do a lot. And if they do, the hospitality, the transportation, including the airport and everything else that moves patients, and not only patients, but their family. So we found at Mayo Clinic is that families might come for a whole year. Someone has a special treatment, maybe they're getting some new drug or technique, and they may have to stay for a year. So Mayo Clinic actually now is starting to help the families, like place children in the schools. Just somebody to help them navigate that, because you got a lot on your plate, and you have your family because you don't want to be away for a long time. So these are some of the hospitality related services that the hotels are starting to provide as people come. This next slide just shows just some of the countries that seem to be doing a lot in the medical. Of course, the US also, as you know, but these are some of the, and most of the times they have their own specialties, I should say. So we told you where that was. Yeah, so that's it. It's one of the world's top 10 medical tourism destinations, Tel Aviv. So that's known as a medical mecca. But there are a lot of other places. Phuket, here is Dubai, Harvard opened a healthcare city. Of course, there are hotels associated with it. A good friend of mine, his daughter was my student, and he was the CEO for Johns Hopkins in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. And here are some of his facilities that he ran as the chief executive officer for Abu Dhabi. Again, we did a conference 3 years ago in Switzerland, and we're doing another one this coming June. And it was a medical tourism conference, looking at the patient, looking at the hotel, looking at the healthcare, and how they merged the two. So where we have this conference is in a town called Bad Ragaz, Switzerland. Bad Ragaz. Bad means bath, so it's an old Roman town, Roman baths, and people would go there to heal. So they've opened up a whole medical complex. This is the hotel, one of the hotels. They have 2 5-star hotels. This is called the Quellenhof. And then they have another hotel, I don't think I have a picture of, but it's all suites. So people would check in, and they'd come from all over the world. They were getting a lot of Russians coming and checking in. And then they would have their procedure in the medical clinic. And then they would go back to the hotel. And then to rehab, they had their own spa. And they had then baths, the thermal baths. So they combined all of that and had, I still think, one of the best setups of any in the world. So there's a good picture. You can see the hotels, the clinic, the wellness, and that's the therm, Termina therm. So that's all naturally fed water, well over 100 degrees, and they use that, they incorporate that into the rehab. So people would come there, have the treatment, stay in the hotel. And by the way, the restaurants, very healthful cuisine, and very high quality. They have one restaurant called Olives, and it's all Mediterranean, based on the Mediterranean diet. And I like to use that when I plan the trip. In fact, I'm doing it now, and we like to have meals in Olives because, you learn about the Mediterranean diet, we teach you about that. But our conferees get to hear all the speakers that we bring, but also the speakers that are there. The doctors, dietitians, the hotel manager, managing director, all very supportive of what we want to do. So we're doing this next, I think it's June 6th through the 8th. If anybody's interested in coming, we'll have good rates for the hotel. And we'll learn about medical tourism. So from my perspective, this is one of the best templates or best models if you're ever thinking of doing it. Not too long ago, it was kind of out of the blue, my book. Someone emailed me and said, I'm thinking about developing this in Italy, something like this. Would you help? He lives in Nice, somewhere in the south of France. But he's from Russia, and he was really big in oil. So very wealthy. So I'm waiting to hear back from him. I heard 3 times from him, but we'll see how that goes. But nevertheless, you're starting to see more and more of these types of investments. Even in the United States. In my book, I have a case study on one in Pennsylvania. But in Switzerland, there's several. And around the world, I think you're going to see more. The other trend, I think, from what my perception is, you're going to see a lot more with stem cell replacement. I really think, because when I go to conferences, I see a lot of clinics that are already doing it. None in the US. Australia, some in the Caribbean, they've built these big medical centers for stem cell, where they can regrow parts of the pancreas, so to produce insulin. And so I sit in these meetings and I listen to the speakers, and it's just so interesting, the whole science behind it and what they can do. Regenerate the cartilage in your knee, if anybody has the bone on bone. So people will have to travel, and many times the insurance company will pay. Blue Cross Blue Shield, in South Carolina, we're sending people overseas for treatment. So I think this is a trend. Yes?
Is this property actually involved in medical tourism? Are they doing procedures at this property?
Yes.
Now, my question,
Mm-hmm.
This Switzerland is
Yes.
known as a high-cost area.
It's expensive.
So compared to Malaysia or Thailand,
More expensive. They go after the high-end customers, people that can afford it. Russia, Germany. You get some from Japan. So when I go there, it's a very diverse, very eclectic, very good group. And
High-end group.
well, it's all high end. Just to stay there, you know, it's high end. The room rate, we get a good rate, but I think they're running 3 to 500 Swiss francs per night. And then
And as franc, when I was there last month, it's actually about a
it's not
franc's
too
worth
bad
of
now.
a
It's
buck
come
and a
down.
quarter.
No, it's not that high. No, I think it's.
It's at least $1.
Oh yeah, it's a little more. They're actually at parity not too long ago, but the franc is a little stronger by about 5 cents. It's the euro maybe you're thinking of. The euro has gone up. Anyway, so this is called the Grand Resort, and I've written an article. You can probably find it. I have another article I've written with a professor from Cornell. I haven't published it yet. Not really happy with it, but basically it looks at the design of a facility like this. Because you have leisure guests in here with guests that are there for medical. And the way they've designed the building, you would never meet, never really see each other. So it's a really good Swiss design. I've know the managing director there, so he's taken me on tours and separate elevators, separate corridors, and how they do it. So if you're there for leisure, there's a golf course that runs all. In fact, they had the LPGA there a couple of years ago, maybe. So it's a very nice, and it's surrounded by the Alps, snow-capped Alps. So it's quite a place to go. Okay, so I've put this slide up here again because think about getting there. People that might not be able to fly, but this air cruise might be a good way to go. China. Got to talk about China in terms of opportunities, future opportunities. So, I love this quote. How many have seen this? Napoleon, back in what, the 1800s, late 1700s, said, "Let China sleep, for when she wakes, she will shake the world." I mean, he was a good strategist, right? And he saw what happens. You've probably seen this. It just shows China and how, and as other countries, India, but where the growth is on the necklace, so to speak. Whereas in the middle, although that's starting to expand, and there'll be more opportunities for tourism there. You know, big travelers, you can see some of the statistics and how China is going to have the most tourists, said by 2020. Number of cities with over 1 million people. So you can see China, I didn't count them up, but it's quite significant compared to the US. How many cities in the United States have over 1 million people? Cities.
8?
That's about right, yeah, 7, 8, or 9. And that's interesting, isn't it, to think about it. How many cities? Because we think of New York, but China, all of these cities you see. So I was in Shanghai, I was telling you, there are about 20 million people just in Shanghai. And a lot of traffic, but a beautiful city right on the water. So these are some of by 2020 you can see China will be a major destination. In fact, be the top destination. You can see the others. It's from WTO. This is a Howard Johnson, a 5-star hotel. So when you go to China, if you haven't been, you know, you would never think of a Howard Johnson or Days Inn having a 5-star. But there, the hotels are beautiful. I was there 2008, but I was there after that as well. But this is a photo of one of my classmates at Virginia Tech, with both doctoral students. He's at FIU. And I was there for the Olympics. I've been fortunate to do 4 Olympic games with my students with Aramark. 96 Atlanta, 2000 Sydney, 2004 Athens, and then the last one was in Beijing. One of the big challenges for China, and you can see it in that picture, is the pollution situation. And I know when I go, after about a day, you get a sore throat. And so that's just one of the things we're going to have to overcome. That's going to be one of the challenges, but nevertheless, people want to go there. I think I've done surveys with my students. I've asked parents. You know, students love to go to Australia and New Zealand. I had 75 applicants, and I only had like 28 slots. But to go to Asia, to China, very few want to go. It's just the way it is. Parents, same way. just really worry about sending. Not Chinese people are beautiful people. You feel very safe and very friendly out on the street if you haven't been. But still, there's this perception. It's a long way to go. But I think with the cruise ship, people will be more likely. It's kind of like Cuba, and I said this years ago. Cuba will open up, but they don't have the infrastructure. They'll have to stay on cruise ships. And sure enough, that's happened because they don't have the internet, the hotels aren't that good, the whole infrastructure of Cuba, even though you can go. I always thought that ships would be the way to go. And I think for places that maybe students are just not sure about, I think taking the cruise ship is gonna open up a lot more opportunities to at least see the place for the first time. So you can get off the ship, spend a day, but then get on board and then go to another place. So I think in China, hopefully our cruise that we're gonna do with the Confucius Institute will get a lot of good interest for the whole university. And I, by the way, if you're not familiar with Confucius Institute, how many have been there? They have one of the best views from campus. In fact, probably the best view. You're up really high. You can see everything, right? We were there the other, I think, Monday or Tuesday. But I love their minor or major in Asian studies because in their brochure, which I got a copy of, they're preparing students to work with Asian countries, and they say particularly China and Japan. So if you think about economies of the world, America's first in terms of GDP, China's now second, Japan is third. So this institute here would give a student a real competitive advantage for their career. And I don't know if they have a minor, but I know they have a major. But if they don't have a minor, I should have talked to Dr. Khan, and I think that would be great. And for hospitality students, because that's where a lot of the growth is going to be. You know, Marriott has Starwood, and Starwood has a lot of hotels around Asia. So strategically, they want to be there. So this center, pretty excited about what they're doing, and hopefully we'll do the cruise together. But as I said, the challenges of the pollution. Okay. Any questions so far? So we're doing good. I have about a half hour, I think, roughly.
Yeah, you have another half
Okay.
hour.
So we'll keep going. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Okay.
I don't know if you heard, but Lyft announced today that they are starting a 4-month online free program for people to learn about driverless cars.
Oh.
Anybody can sign up. Driverless Cars 101. So they're going to teach them what it is, how to have careers in their Lyft. So
Yeah, we know
programming,
Lyft
what's required in terms
competes
of
with
careers.
Uber, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
Good. Yeah, I think it's got a lot of potential for our industry. We gave some examples earlier, but also the Uber Eats and food delivery, and I also think for the medical too.
Yeah.
The whole medical tourism. Somebody coming to a city, take you to the hospital, take it to your doctors. That'll play a role in the medical tourism, especially if you can't drive.
right.
They'll pick you right up. So.
I've got a question. Medical tourism in Thailand,
Yeah, I can tell you what it is.
political upheaval.
Yeah, that's an issue. That's a risk. So you look at countries that are stable. That's one of the reasons coming into the U.S., like Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, Johns Hopkins. It's a lot more stable than Thailand because they have, like you say, these political uprisings. But you know what they're known for? Sex change operations. So people go there. I don't know if that's their number one, but if people do go there, but they do other things with heart, and there's some really top. In fact, there's one hospital there that's 60 Minutes. You can Google it. I'm trying to remember the name. I just can't remember the name of it.
I remember the episode.
Yes. So, fantastic hospital. And you know, two things really working in favor of some of these countries. One is their physicians train in America. A lot of them come to America or Europe. So they go to prestigious places. They go back to their home country. So that's number one. The other thing is accreditation. If it's accredited by the Joint Commission Accreditation International, That means they meet standards. Insurance companies see that, if you've met that, they feel more confident to send their patients there. For 1/10 of the cost, that's the average savings, so 1/10. So bypass might be 100,000, it's more than that, but might cost you 10 to 15 to go to India, China, to have that same operation. With American doctors trained in America, Harvard, some of the big name hospitals.
And the insurance company, American insurance companies are picking up more of the tab.
They're picking up all the tab because they're saving a lot of money. Yeah, and actually in the US, so I think it's Home Depot, or it could be Lowe's, but I think it's Home Depot. They have a deal with the Cleveland Clinic where they'll send their employees and managers to the Cleveland Clinic for special procedures and pay for it. So you're starting to see more of these. There's so many things happening in medical. As you know, in America, we have big challenges. We still have great medicine, I think. I mean, we have good, but the price is too high. But usually people can get in as long as they have the insurance and have the means. But nevertheless, it's too expensive, where you hear stories of people. Give you an example there. When I worked in down in Central Florida, the Rosen College, many of you might know this, but the school, the Rosen College, was named after Harris Rosen. So he's built a lot of nice hotels all over Orlando. But the other thing he did, this is about 15 years ago, he opened his own medical clinic with his own doctors, nurses, staff for his employees and their family and the children. So it's still there, as we talked to Harris Rosen when I was there. And he's funny. I mean, he's really upset with the US, what they're doing. A lot of people are studying what he's done. So it's saved, we asked him, I think about 300 million. But he also gets his pharmaceuticals from Canada and South America because they're a lot less expensive. So he told a story of a patient that went into a hospital and needed aspirin. So got the two aspirin, $46 for the bottle for the aspirin when the bill came. He says, yeah, they gave him 2 aspirin, charged him for the bottle, and they kept the bottle. So he was a little upset. He said, I don't even give you the bottle of aspirin, but who's going to pay that much? But that's a true story. So he's really into this hospitality and healthcare. So we're studying that like as a case study, and we'd like to try to replicate that model. It's a great model. The other thing he didn't quantify, but in my human resources research, is just the satisfaction of your employees, the low turnover of employees. You can put a dollar amount on. It's difficult, but you can try to put a dollar amount. Just having that service for his employees, they're more likely to stay and be motivated, satisfied, and that's probably worth, I don't know, you tell me, millions, right? So he's quite an interesting guy, very, very motivating. One of the things is space tourism. And I think this one, being in Orlando, which is really a great place to be because there's a lot of innovation with the theme parks and the Space Coast less than an hour away. So SpaceX, a lot of Amazon and others are looking at space tourism, building rockets and testing them not far from Orlando in Cape Canaveral. So space tourism, I think this is something we're going to start to see. Won't be long, they're still trying to perfect it, but there'll be people going, in fact, in New Mexico State University, they have a hospitality program. They're actually doing research on types of facilities, because people have to come and stay and train before they go up into space. But they're starting to really think this out. In fact, years ago, Hilton Corporation, they actually come out, they have prototypes of the lunar Hilton. You can find it. So anticipating what's going to come. Wall Street Journal, Tim knows we require it. There was an article looking at 3D printers. You probably heard about those. Actually building hotels on the moon, printing out blocks, bricks, which will be put in place by robotics, controlled from Earth, to build structures so people could actually use the materials on the moon to build these hotels. It was a great article in the Wall Street Journal. So, and there's space station there now. I think we're going to start to see this whole area open up down the road and people wanting to go on the ride.
Doc, I
itself.
want to make a comment about, when I first read
Yeah.
that blueprint,
Uh-huh.
the most intriguing thing was the swimming pool, because it was a huge blob of water in space, and you dived in one end, you went through it, and you came out the other end. That stayed with me.
But
If
the
you had a swimming pool in space,
No gravity.
that's how it would be. It would be a big blob of water, and you dive through
know.
it. It's,
Yeah.
and they really had a blueprint, I read it. It's amazing.
Yeah. So you can find that, if you Google Hilton and Lunar Hilton, you'll see a lot of articles, a lot of designs. This one I thought was pretty interesting, so pretty exciting. The other one is a little more far out, but something they're actually working on. This is what we call beanstalk to the stars, actually using high tensile strength
Space elevator.
nanotubes, the space elevator, yeah, and actually going up into space with an elevator. And you can read a lot about that too. People hope that'll come to pass someday. So jobs aplenty. We like it for hospitality, tourism. That today about 11% of the world's people work in that industry. That's pretty good. But by 2060, 25%, 1 in 4 jobs will be in our field. So I think that's a really great thing. And tell your students they're going to be in demand. So I mean, no telling how you can go. Use some imagination, and certainly the teamwork and working with diverse cultures, coming up with some creative ideas. That's the thing we have to do as an industry. It's this whole blue ocean, always trying to create something that people maybe don't know they need yet, or haven't traveled to, they need to see. So in our industry, there's a lot of opportunity to create experiences, right? So we talk about the experience economy. There's a Pine and Gilmore. How many have read that book called The Experience Economy? It's an older book. Actually, starting to read it again because I'm whole fascinated. So the key for competition in our industry is really trying to recreate and create new things. So you have something unique, a unique product, whether it's space elevator, space tourism, medical tourism with your hotel associated with that, your spa associated with it, cruises, just trying to come up with something imaginable and desirable for customers. So very interested in all of that. So if we go back to the handout, I did have a slide up there, but I went through it. I thought I'd save this to the end. So if you everybody should have one, right? I don't know if anybody didn't get one. You probably have a couple.
Yeah, I got
Anybody need one?
somebody.
Everybody has one? Okay. So these are some of the things we see in a new book we talk about. So the whole virtual reality, you turn to the second page, we talk about this. If you're familiar with these, and you turn over to the next page, page 3 actually, we talk about virtual reality and how businesses will be able to have customers actually project and feel like they are in another country, for example. So they're at the Sydney Opera House watching a performance, a place I like to take my students to. I've been there a dozen times, and it's more than opera. That's kind of a misnomer. Dr. DeMicco, we don't like opera. I said, well, there's really no opera there. They may have opera, but it's the Beach Boys in one room. They have about 12 venues in the Opera House. You've seen the Sydney Opera House, and they have magic shows. I saw Cirque du Soleil. So they have a lot of different things going on at one time. But imagine being able to watch that virtually and immerse yourself in that. So the question always I ask my students, is that a good thing or is that a negative thing for travel? So you can see both sides. One said, well, you know, they're not going to go there then. They're going to stay home, sit in their living room, and not going to ever go. And others said, well, it's going to open their eyes. They want to go there and experience it. So I think it's going to probably do a little bit of both. But nevertheless, this whole virtual reality is really exciting for our industry. The Alamo, Statue of Liberty, National Park, they already, you can visit them already virtually. I know you heard about hotels. We can see what your view is going to be out of the hotel, your cruise ship balcony, what it's going to look like, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one thing.
Just 1 second.
Yeah.
There is a company that actually has taken Google Street View and they edit the videos from it to turn it into trips, sightseeing tours for cities.
That's great.
So that you don't have, and it's amazing. You would think that in Street View you can't see much, but they actually give you a tour. If you want to do the Egyptian pyramid, because some of these actually are on the heads of people, these cameras, and they walk around the pyramid, so you're actually right next to it. So they're taking all those clips and doing a sightseeing tour, virtual sightseeing. You can sit there and click on one, and you get a city tour of Paris, or a city tour of, so there are creative ways to do business using this. And I thought that was really, what's already there, they're turning that into a business.
It's pretty exciting.
Pretty exciting.
And it's usually of things that we're involved in, right? I mean, it's travel, it's hospitality, theme parks. So I think it's gonna help us, and particularly people that haven't traveled. So we were talking about China, and think about all the people there that, billions, was it 1.4 billion people? And India is like over 1 billion now, and they say that's gonna surpass China one day in terms of just people that haven't had the chance to travel. So, so that's good. The other thing on page 4 is the augmented reality, which is like virtual reality, but basically takes your view and enhances it. So it might show you where a certain restaurant is on the view that you see walking down the street. On page 5, we talk about this iPhone app called World Lens, which can translate street signs in about 36 languages. Google Translate does in about 37. So you just take a picture of the sign with your iPhone, and it will translate it for you. I think that's pretty exciting as far as for traveling. If you're not familiar with the language, you'll have a chance to feel more comfortable. Number 3, the faster than speeding bullet. We've been talking about that. I mentioned Elon Musk, the Hyperloop. So Beijing to Moscow, very, very, very fast. We're starting to think about that as a trip. Space tourism we mentioned. So we'll see how that goes. Pretty excited. Musk says he's going to go to the moon in 2018. I know Bezos from Amazon says he has hundreds of people on a waiting list willing to pay almost $100,000 to travel to go to the moon. So they say when you take this trip, you see like 12 sunrises and sunsets as you travel around. So people are ready for it.
But none of them are landing. They go around the moon and come back.
Right, they don't land. That's
They go
exactly.
down.
So basically, you go up, and it's not very long. What's that?
Oh, I was just trying
No.
to imagine.
So you go up, and then you come down. So it kind of lands like a plane. So in New Mexico, they're actually building the runways for the spacecraft to come down and land with the tourists.
The moon is 1 week.
But this is discount if you have Prime
Or
as
less.
well.
1 week, yeah, 1 week or less, you can just go. It depends on how the fuel is.
Let's see. So you can read. So you can
No,
read.
to save fuel, they have to use the gravity kick. So that's what makes the route longer, because to save on fuel, so that's why it may take a week. It's only 250,000 miles. You know, moon is only 250,000 miles.
Yeah, but
so
if you
it's
can't
not-
land.
Have you signed up?
I have mine.
You have his name on a reservation?
But I do wanna tell you, if you haven't seen it, about the augmented reality being used in
Yes.
our industry, the latest example. I was at a museum, and you can put on I think they had special glasses, and they had a cardboard box on the table. And when you put on your glasses, you can choose how the structure, which was the building that we were in, how it looked at different stages of its life, going back 1,000 years. Okay, so you can just change the timeline, it'll show you how the building structure changed. And you can walk around, you can actually walk around the block and you can actually see in all dimensions how the building had changed. It was just incredible how real it felt.
Where was this?
In Spain. In,
Madrid?
Yeah. There's a Casa Bayo. In that they had a building. Yeah. So it's coming in, whether, you should see it in here. If you are familiar with Legos does